in political, social, and economic matters. Let's learn more about this process.
Since 1980, the country has been ruled by the constitution created by Augusto Pinochet's military regime, which has intensified economic, social, and political inequalities. In the 2020 national plebiscite, the Chilean people will decide where they will move toward a process that will generate a new constitution and the mechanism to be drafted. More than 14 million Chileans were called to vote. Citizens will be able to choose between two ballots. The first will have the question, do you want a new constitution? Which can be answered, I approve or reject. And the second, what kind of body should draft the new constitution? Which shall be chosen from a mixed constitutional convention composed of equal parts of popular elected members and members of parliament in office, or a constitutional convention in which only popularly elected members will be accepted. At the end of the election period, the members of the Bureau receiving votes shall count the votes obtained in each of the ballots submitted. As the tables complete their counting process, which will generate preliminary results, the definitive ones will be published on the website of Chile's Electoral Service. In case that the I approve option wins, the constituents will be chosen to write the new constitution and will meet on April 11, 2021. Same day in which the municipal and regional government elections will be held.
For further analysis, we are joined live by Danny Shaw. He's a professor of international relations at the Public University of New York. Hi, Danny. Thank you so much for joining us today. So could you tell us what the importance of today's plebiscite in Chile is, and what do you expect the outcome will be in today's referendum?
This is the ongoing showdown between the Chilean political class, the Chilean ruling class, and masses of dispossessed students, workers. This is the legacy of Salvador Allende and the legacy of Augusto Pinochet, a legacy of dictatorship and political murders and torture, all coming to a head in this showdown after a year of massive protests against the billionaire businessman Sebastián Piñera. We've had millions of people in the streets, and once the pandemic hit, the Chilean people could no longer as safely be in the streets, so they began to organize across social media, and this is the culmination of months and months, if not decades, of organizing.
So, Danny, do you think it's fair to say that today's referendum is a result of the protests in Chile?
No question. Those that are in power, the carabineros and the state forces of repression don't want to see this. They resent this popular referendum. We see Chileans lining up across the world, from France to Australia, millions and millions of Chileans in the streets. Chilean confidence in their politicians is at an all-time low. We've seen it declining and declining. Some estimates are that only 5 to 10% of the population trust politicians anymore. So they've decided to take power into their own hands, from the street to the polls, definitely inspired by movements in the victory, the electoral victory in Bolivia last Sunday. Now we have Chile moving left. So this certainly will have repercussions across the entire continent.
So that was my next question. What do you think the referendum's outcome will mean for Latin America and the region also?
This is going to be a significant step forward for a pink tide that was interrupted. We saw a ton of momentum in the early 2000s through 2013, but then with the criminal illegal blockade of Venezuela, with the U.S. doing everything to cut off Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela from any international solidarity and cooperation, these are major steps forward. The victory in Bolivia would surely will be a massive victory for the Chilean people, a fight back movement that's going to continue after today against the Sebastián Piñera neoliberal regime. This can open up a lot of space for Venezuela to breathe for a Cuba and a Nicaragua to breathe. We have elections coming up in a year plus in Brazil. Just like in Argentina with the defeat of Macri, we think we'll see a defeat of Bolsonaro and fascism in Brazil. We've seen Mexico for the first time move beyond the ruling class interests of the pre-party with Lopez Obrador. So certainly the horizons appear infinite right now across Latin America and the Caribbean.
Now, Danny, many people that took to the streets during the ongoing protests were young people in their 20s and their 30s. Do you think their vote will be decisive in today's referendum?
No question. This youthful generation is demanding new political leadership, new organization, new forms of popular democracy. They're feeling bolder and bolder every day. 1 year ago was when they first came into the streets with the October explosion, which shook not just Santiago de Chile, but all of Southern America. This is led by the youth, the fearless youth, the youth who are the generation that the tortured, exiled, and murdered left wing of the 1970s and 1980s with the Pinochetismo, the Pinochet dictatorship. This is the generation that learned from that generation. So today, this is really a significant historical and spiritual day in the history of anti-imperialist struggle in Chile.
Yeah, some people have even said today is one of the most important days for Chile. Now, what do you think? Let's talk about the government of President Piñera. How do you think that today's referendum will affect his popularity?
Well, his popularity is already extremely low. It's high with the interests of big capital, but his popularity with the Mapuche people, the indigenous, with students, with the poor, with the working majority is very, very low. So we're seeing this class struggle play out first in the streets, now in the polls. The ruling class in the Carabineros, the state, were divided in terms of how to deal with this massive uprising. Some wanted to use the machine gun in Pinochet-esque style, but others said we will use surveillance and state intelligence to track these online activists or to find the organizers in a more private way so they could try to maintain the camouflage of democracy. Because there were moments when we thought, are the Carabineros going to continue to slaughter and commit massacres? There were some 20 massacres in the Pinochet era of student protest and left-wing protests. So thus far, the Chilean state appears to be divided. The ruling class appears to be divided. And this mass movement is taking advantage of that, surging towards a new future.
Now, lastly, Danny, if the referendum today were to be approved, what's next for Chile?
What's next for Chile is a brand new day in Chile, harkening back to 1970 when Salvador Allende, representing the very best in the unity of the Chilean people, won a historic election as a social democrat, as a socialist, and made big moves to distribute land to the dispossessed, to stop evictions of the poor, to have a true living wage. All of these attempts to beat back the neoliberal agenda, which has been in place under Piñera. So the future is very bright for the people of Chile because they've proven that they can step up, fight back, and actually win. And today is the fruit of decades and decades of a mass movement that's been in the street boldly and fearlessly.
Danny, let me just ask you one more question that I asked my previous guest. Do you think protests will continue today, later today, or even in the coming weeks or months?
Well, it really depends on the result of these elections and how the ruling class responds. Certainly, if there's any type of attempts at fraud and to not recognize the result of this popular plebiscite, certainly the movement will be in full swing and they will occupy the streets of Chile again. But I think what we're expecting in the next few days is more a sense of jubilation as the people who've been fighting for so long against the Piñera neoliberal pro-imperialist agenda are going to also be in celebration mode, but also very vigilant to see what happens. Just like the people right now of Bolivia are very vigilant to see what's the next move of the right wing to defend their class interests.
We'll continue to remain vigilant as well here in Telesur English. Thank you so much, Danny, for your time for us.
Thank you.
We have been speaking with Danny Sean, a professor of international relations at the Public University of New York. Let's take a short break now. Don't go away.